Let's get right into it. Number 10. Victorian toothpaste of nightmares. Picture yourself waking up in 1885. You roll out of bed in your drafty Victorian house, your chamber pot is staring at you from the corner like it has a vendetta, and you think, time to brush my teeth. Except, surprise, your toothpaste is literally made out of crushed bones and chalk. And if you're feeling extra fancy, sometimes they throw in brick dust. Yep, brick dust. Congratulations, your oral hygiene routine is now the equivalent of sanding down your molars with a construction site. Dentists back then thought abrasive pastes were the way to go. If your enamel cried, they considered it a win. And here's the kicker. Fluoride, the stuff that actually helps protect your teeth today, wasn't a thing yet. So instead of preventing cavities, these pastes just scraped your teeth until they sparkled like a freshly polished tombstone. Pretty, sure, but underneath, your mouth was a crime scene. And if you didn't have brick dust handy, no worries. Some recipes called for soot, crushed seashells, or even burnt breadcrumbs. So you'd be walking around with a smile that said, "I ate the entire beach and then set it on fire." Oh, and toothbrushes? They were made with animal hair bristles, which sounds rustic and charming until you realize that horsehair isn't exactly the sterilized tool of modern dentistry. Imagine sharing bristles with an animal that spends half its day eating hay and the other half licking its own nose. Science at the time believed the whiter, the healthier, which is adorable, considering people also thought drinking radium water was a flex. But the irony, the more you brushed with your bone and brick concoction, the faster your teeth wore down. So by the time you're middle-aged, you probably had fewer teeth than a jack-o'-lantern in December. So yeah, next time you roll your eyes at a slightly minty toothpaste that claims to whiten in 7 days, just remember, at least it's not powdered masonry.
Number 9. The Dancing Plague. Imagine this. You're walking through a medieval town square, minding your own business, probably trying to trade goats for turnips or whatever, when suddenly, boom, your neighbor starts breakdancing against their will. And not in a cool street performance way. No, I'm talking about the infamous dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg. Dozens, then hundreds of people just started dancing, uncontrollably, for days. Some laughed, some cried, some collapsed, and many literally danced themselves to death. Yes, death by cardio. Forget dance like nobody's watching. These folks danced like death itself was the DJ. Historians still argue about what caused it. Some blame ergot poisoning, which is basically medieval LSD growing on moldy rye bread. Others think it was mass hysteria, where one person's weird freakout spreads like a psychological virus. Either way, it turned a sleepy European town into the world's worst rave. No music, no lights, no glow sticks, just peasants flailing until their hearts gave out. The authorities didn't help, by the way. Their genius solution was to build stages and hire musicians, thinking it would dance the illness out. Imagine suffering from a mysterious affliction, and the government's response is more cowbell. Predictably, this only encouraged more people to join in, and the death toll kept climbing. It's a historical reminder that your brain and body can team up to kill you in the weirdest ways possible. Because sure, famine and plague were scary, but dying because you couldn't stop doing the medieval Macarena? That's a whole new level of nightmare fuel. So if you ever find yourself compulsively doing TikTok dances, maybe check your bread.
Number 8. Victorian morning photography. All right, here's a creepy one. You know how today we take selfies at weddings, birthdays, and brunch? Victorians took selfies too, except their favorite photo op was with dead people. Post-mortem photography was an actual trend. When someone in the family died, especially kids, photographers would pose the corpse as if it were alive. They'd prop open eyelids, arrange them in chairs, or even position them with their living siblings. And since exposure times were long, the dead person often came out looking sharper than the living, which means in the photo, little Timmy might be blurry while his very dead sister looks like she's ready for a LinkedIn headshot. Why? Because photography was expensive, and not everyone had family portraits. So when someone died, families thought, well, this might be our only chance. The result? Albums filled with images of stiff, eerily lifelike relatives. Some were even painted afterwards to look more alive. Rosy cheeks, bright eyes, all the works. It's the kind of thing you'd scroll past on Instagram and think, wow, what filter is that? Oh wait, it's rigor mortis. Psychologically, it makes sense. In an era of high mortality rates, mourning practices blurred the line between life and death. People needed closure, and photos provided a weird sense of permanence. But viewed through modern eyes, it's pure nightmare fuel. Imagine being 5 years old, hugging your deceased sister for a photo while your parents tell you to smile. Therapy? Not invented yet. So yeah. The next time someone drags you into a group selfie, remember, it could be worse. At least everyone's breathing.
Number 7. The radium craze. Picture this. It's the early 1900s, and everyone is obsessed with this shiny new element called radium. It glows in the dark, it looks magical, and best of all, they thought it was healthy. So naturally, people put it in everything. Toothpaste? Check. Cosmetics? Absolutely. Drinking water laced with radioactive particles? You bet your glowing skeleton they did. They sold radium water as an energy booster. The pitch was basically, want to live forever? Just sip this invisible death juice. Rich businessmen literally had cases of the stuff delivered daily, like sparkling water subscriptions, except instead of hydration, it gave you jaw necrosis and tumors. And oh, the radium girls. Factories hired women to paint watch dials with glowing radium paint because nothing says glamorous than clock hands that shine at night. The women were told to lick the brushes into a fine point with their mouths. Imagine clocking in every morning and swallowing your daily dose of Chernobyl. Within a few years, many suffered radium jaw, where their teeth fell out, their bones disintegrated, and their faces literally collapsed. Horrifying doesn't even cover it. The wildest part? Ads bragged about it. There were radium chocolates, radium suppositories, I wish I was kidding, and even radium condoms because apparently someone thought glowing genitals was the future of romance. It was like society collectively decided, you know what's sexy? Radiation poisoning. Psychologically, this wasn't stupidity, it was hype. People trusted new science the same way we might trust a new health trend today. Think of it like early 20th century kale smoothies, except instead of antioxidants, you got radiation sickness. So next time you hear about some miracle health fad, remember the guy in 1927 who drank so much radium water his entire skeleton glowed on x-rays right before he died a gruesome death.
Number 6. Trepanning. DIY brain surgery. Okay, let's talk about trepanning. The ancient practice of drilling a hole in your skull while you're still alive. Yes, it was exactly as bad as it sounds. Imagine your neighbor showing up with a rock and saying, "Don't worry, this will fix your headaches." Humans have been trepanning for thousands of years. Archaeologists find skulls from as far back as 7,000 BCE with perfect little holes carved into them. And here's the kicker. Many of those skulls show signs of healing, meaning people actually survived this. Which makes you wonder, how desperate do you have to be to let someone take a stone chisel to your head and call it medicine? Why did they do it? Well, depending on the culture, it was supposed to cure migraines, epilepsy, mental illness, or even release evil spirits. Basically, it was the ancient version of, have you tried turning it off and on again, but for your brain? Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and doctors were still doing it. Except by then, they had fancy metal tools, which is somehow even scarier. Imagine lying on a table, no anesthesia, no antibiotics, just a surgeon with shaky hands and a hammer. If you didn't die from shock or infection, congratulations, you now have a stylish window in your skull. The psychology of it is fascinating though.
People believed suffering came from forces trapped inside the head. The hole was a literal escape hatch for demons, which, in a weird metaphorical way, isn't far off from modern psychology, except today we use therapy instead of power tools. So yeah, migraines are terrible, but maybe, just maybe, an Advil is better than a hole in your forehead.
Number 5. Bloodletting bonanza. If you lived any time before, the 19th century and you got sick, the doctor's first move was probably, let's drain you like a Capri Sun. Because apparently nothing screams healing like bloodletting. Fever? Bloodletting. Headache? Bloodletting. Stubbed toe? Guess what? Bloodletting. The belief was that your body had 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And sickness meant they were out of balance. And how do you fix that? By poking holes in you until your bed looks like a low-budget horror movie. Barber surgeons, yes, your local barber doubled as your doctor, used leeches, knives, or spring-loaded devices that basically worked like meat tenderizers. If you didn't die from whatever illness you had, you might die from blood loss or infection. But hey, at least your humors were balanced. And here's the weirdest part. This wasn't some fringe idea. Bloodletting was mainstream for centuries. George Washington, America's first president, literally died after his doctors drained almost half his blood in one day trying to cure a throat infection. Basically, he didn't lose his life to illness, he lost it to medieval science cosplay. From a psychological standpoint, it's a classic case of medical placebo. Patients sometimes felt better after mild bloodletting, not because it helped, but because the brain loves ritual. If you see blood draining, you believe the sickness is leaving your body. Spoiler, it wasn't. So yeah, next time you complain about your doctor prescribing antibiotics just in case, remember we used to treat colds by turning people into juice boxes.
Number 4. The miasma myth. Let's rewind to a time before germ theory, when people had no clue what bacteria were, but still had to explain why everyone kept dying. Enter the miasma theory. For centuries, folks believed disease didn't come from germs, it came from bad air. Literal poison clouds just floating around like invisible fart demons. Picture medieval Europe. The plague is ravaging towns, and doctors strolling around in those creepy bird beak masks. You know the ones, they look like a crow auditioning for Phantom of the Opera. Those masks weren't just for drama. The beaks were stuffed with herbs, flowers, and sometimes vinegar-soaked sponges to filter the bad air, which, of course, did nothing to stop the Black Death. But hey, at least the corpses smelled faintly of lavender. The logic was simple. If a swamp smelled gross, people got sick nearby, so clearly the smell itself was the culprit. Nobody thought, maybe it's the rats carrying fleas infected with a bacterium that causes one of the most infamous pandemics in history. Nope, it was swamp stink. This theory stuck around well into the 19th century. Cities even redesigned sewage systems, not to stop water contamination, but to keep the air from smelling funky, which ironically did reduce disease by accident. They thought they were banishing evil vapors, but they were actually cutting down on cholera. Sometimes it pays to be wrong in the right direction. Psychologically, the miasma theory made sense. People needed a tangible enemy. You can't see bacteria, but you can smell a rotting alleyway, and fear loves something you can point your nose at. So next time you complain about a weird smell on the subway, just remember, your ancestors thought that stench alone could kill them. Which, to be fair, is still sort of true if you've ever stood near the bathroom car.
Number 3. Child chimney sweeps. Okay, prepare yourself, because this one is grim. In 18th and 19th century England, chimneys were narrow, dirty, and clogged with soot. Perfect job for children, right? And by children, I mean kids as young as 4 years old. Yep, 4. Imagine barely knowing how to tie your shoes and already being shoved up a fireplace like a Victorian raccoon. These kids, called climbing boys, were forced to wriggle up and down narrow chimney flues, scraping soot as they went. They'd get cut, burned, suffocated, or trapped. Some even died stuck inside chimneys, which is about the worst version of hide and seek you can imagine. But wait, it gets worse. The soot exposure often caused soot wart, one of the first known occupational cancers. So even if they survive childhood chimney spelunking, they might still die painfully young. And if you're wondering what adults did about this, not much, because hey, cheap labor. Psychologically, society justified it with the same mental gymnastics people use today to excuse shady labor practices. It builds character, they said. Right, character, lung disease, and lifelong trauma. Eventually, laws banned the practice, but not before an entire generation of kids basically lived like chimney goblins. So the next time you grumble about chores, just remember, at least you weren't sent to clean soot by crawling through a hole the size of a pizza box.
Number 2. Medicine show snake oil. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. It's the 19th century and traveling salesmen are hitting small towns with the hottest new product, snake oil. Or more accurately, random bottles of mystery liquid that could contain anything from alcohol to morphine to literal turpentine. The ads promised miracle cures for everything: baldness, impotence, headaches, even tuberculosis. It was basically Amazon reviews before the internet, except every single product was a scam. The pitchmen were half doctors, half stand-up comics. They'd roll into town on a wagon, put on a flashy performance, and convince people to hand over their life savings for bottles of poison. People guzzled this stuff like it was Gatorade, and shocker, sometimes they felt better. Why? Placebo effect. And sometimes because the medicine was basically liquid cocaine. You don't feel sick when your bloodstream is 30% narcotics. The phrase snake oil salesman comes from this era, but the real irony? Actual Chinese snake oil, made from water snakes, contained omega-3s and really did help with inflammation. It was the American knockoffs that ruined the name. Leave it to capitalism to turn a decent idea into a literal bottle of turpentine-flavored lies. Psychologically, people bought in because they wanted control over their lives. Modern medicine was still a guessing game, so when a smooth-talking salesman promised salvation in a bottle, hope won out over logic. So yeah, today we roll our eyes at detox teas and miracle gummies, but the tradition of drinking garbage for health is alive and well. At least now the FDA occasionally raises an eyebrow.
Number 1. Death by Beauty, Lead Makeup. Here's the finale, and it's a doozy. Imagine wanting to look flawless so badly that you're willing to slowly poison yourself to death. Welcome to centuries of lead-based cosmetics. For hundreds of years, pale skin was considered the ultimate status symbol. If you were pale, it meant you weren't out in the fields sweating like a peasant. Enter Venetian Ceres, a fashionable face paint made of, you guessed it, white lead. Women and men slathered it on to get that powdered porcelain look. And it worked, for a while anyway, until your skin started rotting off. Lead makeup caused hair loss, tooth decay, neurological problems, and eventually death. But instead of blaming the poison, society blamed the user. If you died covered in white flakes, people would just sigh and say you had vanity sickness. Translation, you should have been uglier and you'd still be alive. The craziest part? People knew it was harmful, but the demand never went away. Even Queen Elizabeth I allegedly caked her face in lead makeup to hide scars from smallpox. Imagine being the ruler of an empire and still risking brain damage for contouring. Psychologically, this shows how powerful beauty standards are. People will literally trade health for aesthetics. And honestly, not much has changed. We just swap lead powder for filters, Botox, and face slimming gadgets from Instagram. At least they don't actively melt your face off. Yet. So next time you grumble about overpriced concealer, just be thankful it won't slowly kill you. Probably. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.